Okay, assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Last class we started discussing Romanticism, romantic literature and romantic poets. We spoke about the major features of Romanticism and how different it was from the poetry of the Augustan age, or what is generally known the neoclassical age or the age of reason. Before I begin, we finished talking about William Blake. We can't speak enough about William Blake. And generally, William Blake was a pre-romantic. He was writing poetry from London before, I think, the publication of the lyrical ballads by the two major romantic figures, Samuel Coleridge and William Wordsworth. Today, we'll see what William Wordsworth has for us. But before I begin doing this, I want to do some kind of revision for last time's class. So could you please remind me of the major features of Romanticism? Why is romantic literature, or mainly romantic poetry, different from the poetry of the previous age? Yes, what makes romantic poetry romantic? Can you tell me, please?
Now, the heart controls the head.
Okay, for the Romantics, the heart controls the head, not vice versa. Thank you. Please. So the Romantics advocated simplicity, and mainly simplicity in diction, in language. You don't have to use elite, highly embellished, sophisticated, powerful language that mainly university-educated people would understand. Simple language. And, please? Thank you very much. So the subject matter is no longer about courtly love, the life in the court and in the palace, about God and kings and queens and the noble families. It's taken situations from the common life. And that's why we'll find many poems about ordinary people, poor people, about kids, about poor women, about unnamed people sometimes. Yes, please.
Poets usually write to express themselves.
Okay, so poetry is now self-expression. It's no longer didactic in the sense that before this, following the rules of decorum, literature in general and poetry had to teach and please, to teach and delight. So the significant point is, what influence is your poetry going to have on the others, on the readers, on your audiences? But now, poetry is self-expression. A poet has extra comprehensive sensibility to use his feelings and his imagination in order to convey particular emotions and experiences of his own. That's why generally the speaker in, for example, William Wordsworth's poetry, the speaker is William Wordsworth himself. Because the I is the poet. Self-expressive, the first person narrator. Yes?
Yeah, nature was a source of
Thank you.
unlike the city, which is source of
Thank you.
corruption and sense.
Generally, romantic poetry is poetry that is described as anti-city, because we've seen how the city has become, the politics, the political division, the corruption, the factories, the industrial revolution, and everything. So, in a way, the romantics said, okay, this is enough. But instead of fixing the problem, working on the problems, they kind of escaped. And that's why some people criticize them as escapists. Escapism is when you don't have to face the problem, to come with the problem face to face. You just leave it somewhere and you go to live your life somewhere else. So nature was a source of inspiration. We've seen nature in Shakespeare and other poets. But remember, Shakespeare would utilize and exploit nature. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And then he goes on to speak how his beloved, or the dark lady, is more beautiful than nature, than a summer's day. But here, nature is the theme. Nature is the poem itself. And we'll see William Wordsworth in a bit. More, please. Say again? Childhood, okay. Inspiration. So we have simplicity, purity, innocence, inspiration can be taken from childhood. And childhood, even childhood in the city, was corrupted because kids were also sent to work in factories here and there and places where their future, everything was destroyed, ruined. So those poets believe that the child is the father of man. And this is actually a line by William Wordsworth himself, because an adult can learn a lot from childhood, from children. And childhood doesn't have to be, particular age. It could be a state of mind, like innocence and experience. It's a state of mind. You could be innocent, you could be experienced, depending on the situation. But generally, they were advocating a state of innocence, which you can find in the countryside. More, please.
For the Romantics, the intellect and reason were dangerous, and like the Augustines, the imaginations and emotions were dangerous.
So, for the Romantics, imagination is one of the most powerful faculties a person could have. And they were encouraging us to look more inside our hearts and to use our imagination. And this is connected with feelings and connected with memory. We've seen, I think, the sick rose last class.
Yes.
What is it about? We came up with 10 themes. Some of the themes could have been meant by the poet himself. But even now, today, we can give extra meanings to the text. And that's why the reader as an individual is significant to the Romantic poet here. We are encouraged to use our imagination to give our own interpretations to the poems we read, to the text we read. In the Augustan age, generally you read a poem and it has one meaning. Generally, one interpretation. Because when there is satire, someone is criticizing someone else, and that's it. But here you read a poem. Is it about nature? Is it about a woman? Is it about a child? Is it about childhood? Is it about the city, the village? Because symbolism here gives it layers and layers of meanings. And that's why, in a way or another, The Sick Rose is a poem about the power of imagination. Because when you depend on your imagination, when you release your imagination, you can see things differently. You can break the rules imposed upon us. In the past, it was like mathematical. You had to follow the rules, remember, but a regular rhyme scheme, particular language, particular subject matters, particular number of syllables even. So everything was restricted, was chained, but not for the Romantics. One more feature, please.
Individualism.
Individualism was also important, and this is connected with the fact that poetry is self-expression. You have to express your opinion and feelings and emotions as an individual, as a person. And the individual, no matter how poor or how wretched he or she is significant. Because in the city, the individuals were destroyed. People were like machines, or like slaves. You have to work from early hours until late at night for just little money enough to keep you alive, but also to keep you working hard for the factories. There's one significant thing I always focus on here, which is
In the Augustan age, maybe you can write a poem, but you may not change the whole society. But in the Romantic, you can write a poem and you can change the person itself.
okay, this is interesting. Can literature change lives?
Yes.
Can poetry change lives? Sometimes we watch movies and we become, in a way, better people. We read literature, we read fiction, and sometimes we learn new experiences. We are influenced. And this is an issue that needs a lot of discussion. For the Augustans, poetry aims at teaching and delighting. So there is this emphasis on changing people's lives. But in a way, poetry was living somewhere in ivory towers most of the time, in the court, in the palace. But here, those people brought it down, believing that the real change can happen at the grassroots. You know, the grassroots, the masses, the ordinary people. Improve people's lives, imaginations, the way, their styles, the way of living, and you will definitely have a better society. But again, remember, many people believe the Romantics were escapists. They were not interested in fixing the problem. And others say, and I believe in this, that writing poetry itself is an act of change. You don't have to carry weapons or to use violence. You could change by non-violent means. And the most powerful tool of resistance is writing and poetry and language. Yeah. A final point. Yeah.
Maybe feelings and emotions about.
We just said feelings and emotions. Something else, something I always focus on. We said that already. More. The poetic forms, new poetic forms. Like the Romantics, many people will disagree with me, but the Romantics share common features with the metaphysicals. But the sensibility is different. John Donne was more into argument, more into intellectuality, but here more into simplicity and more into feelings and emotions and imagination. But they share the most significant issue here, which is new poetic forms. You don't have to follow the rules of decorum. You try to follow them. If they don't help, you just break the rules. And that's why we'll see so many new poetic forms. We already saw some examples, and we'll see more as we go on with the Romantics. So, William Wordsworth is probably the most significant Romantic poet. Along with his friend Samuel Coleridge, they published a book called The Lyrical Ballads. We mentioned last time. The Lyrical Ballads. And everyone was like amazed, fascinated, because people were tired and fed up with the Augustan poetry. And they were like, oh, we want to know more. What are you doing here? What is this kind of new poetry? So in the second edition to the book, they included a preface, a kind of introduction where they define poetry and they explain their Romantic theory of what writing poetry is. So let's see the definition I mentioned last time in brief and go on for examples from William Wordsworth. So what is poetry? Poetry is the flow of feelings or emotions. Feelings, generally feelings, emotions. But this is not only feelings or emotions, it's powerful. And it's not flow of emotions, it's overflow of powerful emotions. And this overflow is spontaneous. So you don't have to sit and like, okay, what kind of poetry should I write about? I think I should write something here. And you keep squeezing your mind and counting the syllables and checking the rhyme scheme and using difficult language and using particular imagery or something. It is spontaneous. You know spontaneous? عفوي يعني. Like you don't push yourself, you don't pressure yourself to write poetry. Poetry just comes out. It overflows. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Many people only use this definition for the Romantics. It's okay, but it's not accurate. Because the second part is also as significant. Recollected here means remembered or recalled. You know, to recall something? To remember something in tranquility. And this emphasizes memory, especially for William Wordsworth. Memory as a theme. Memory as a tool of, recollecting something when you are in tranquility. And this tranquility, tranquility? Tranquil. Like peace of mind. Like peace of mind. You're living among, the trees, in nature, Mother Nature. You feel at peace. You're peaceful. There are no troubles, no problems, no corruption, no city life issues. You're just in tranquility. That's basically what tranquility is, more or less here. To be alone, in solitude, all alone by yourself, somewhere in nature, among natural elements. So you recollect this. When you go to the city, you will not be able to write this kind of poetry according to William Wordsworth. You have to go alone somewhere in nature. So when you feel this peace of mind, when you don't have trouble or problems from life and work and factories and the industry, you can recollect all the amazing, or at least they can spontaneously flow these powerful emotions or experiences. So what is poetry according to William Wordsworth? The spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. Difficult? Big words? Okay, overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility, recollected in peace. Now, the diction, the language itself, is the real language of men. Here, men and women, of course, don't feel offended. But this is why English generally was considered a sexist language, because many people were considering women to be, second class and intellectual, and many people would defend this, saying that men also includes women. So this is the language of ordinary people, the masses. My language, your language, everyday language, the masses. And the subject matter includes situations from common life. Not from the palace, not from the court, not from the church, not from heaven even. We've seen Milton go up to heaven, to God and Adam and Eve, and Satan, to the original sin. So, spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility, and the language of everyday men, situations from common life. Let's see this poem and try to examine the definitions, the features, and William Wordsworth's theory of Romanticism. This is a poem, it's called The Daffodils. It has 4, I'll post this online, so just please pay attention. It has 4 stanzas. Let me read them and do some commentary later on. The daffodils. You know daffodils? The yellow roses, flowers. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. And that's a poem. And that, by the way, this is the most canonical romantic poem, the most famous romantic poem, the Daffodils. You will study it many times in the future. Today we're just going to see the major features of Romanticism according to William Wordsworth. So if you look at the first stanza, we have here, again, we can see several of the features we're talking about here. There's nature here, right?
Yeah.
There's the individualism, I, personal experience, right? Nature everywhere floats. Are these difficult language, like words?
No, they sound
Most of them, even if you don't know what it means, you can easily guess from the context, or at least you can know that this is a natural element. So what is he saying? He's saying, I wandered lonely as a cloud. And remember in the past, we said there's something called a metaphor and a simile. The simile is where you say something is like or as something. When you use the word is or like, this is a simile. And this is how you write a simile, where you pronounce the E, by the way. And generally, a simile is easier than a metaphor. I know people who do research on the simile and the metaphor. A metaphor is generally not clear. The meaning is implied. You don't know when you say, the teacher roared. I'm just being very simplistic here. The teacher roared. You know, roar is a word you use to describe a lion. So what does that indicate? He spoke loudly, he was angry, he was hungry, you just can't make up your mind. But when you say the teacher ate like a lion or spoke like a lion, so the word like makes it easy for you to know where you're going. So he chooses here a cloud, which is a natural element. And cloud, he could have said a tree, right? But a tree doesn't wander, right? Doesn't move, just a little bit. It's fixed. So he doesn't pick this. Or he could have said, I wandered lonely as a cow, or as a sheep, or as, I don't know, a bird. But he chooses a cloud. A cloud is up, thank you, it's up above. That's one. What else about cloud that makes it really interesting for William Wordsworth?
It takes water and gives water.
It takes water, it gives water. Thank you. What else?
Cannot be easily reached.
It can't easily be reached, probably, also, true.
White?
It's also wild.
White.
White, probably signifies, but not always white, but could be gray sometimes, or dark, or black. And sometimes, generally, it's free. The issue of being free here is highlighted. It moves freely. No human being can control it in a way. It's up above from what is going on down. That floats on high o'er vales and hills. The high places, the low places. Or the low places, high places. When all at once, I also. So, notice the tense here is past simple, right? I saw a crowd, and a crowd generally a crowd of people, a crowd of something. Crowd could be negative, right? If it's crowded, not always, but if it's crowded, it's bad. There is a good crowd, like a lot of people are coming. And then he repeats the same word in other words, in a more positive word, a host. Someone who, hosts you, someone who takes care of you, hospitality here. A host of golden daffodils. So the daffodils are described as golden, and they are personified as welcoming, hosting you. Like they attract you. They make you feel at home, at peace, tranquility, and solitude. Where did he see them? Beside the lake, beneath the trees. Although he was up above, he saw them like in a cloud, because the power of imagination, the onward eye, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Dancing is also a personification. Generally, people dance, not flowers. So what is happening here is the man, the poet, is depersonified. He is likened to a cloud. But nature is personified. And that's an interesting mixture of exchanging of places. If you go for the rhyme scheme, it should be A, B, A, B, C, C. So A, B, and then we have a couplet here. Yeah, trees and trees. So what happens next? Continuous. So the scene of daffodils were continuous as, again, another simile, as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. They, again referring to the daffodils, stretched past simple, never-ending line, along the margin of a bay, near the water, 10,000 saw I at once. At a glance? Yeah. Saw I at a glance. Just one glance and 10,000 daffodils. And that's how overwhelmingly beautiful nature is. 10,000, it should be, I saw 10,000 at a glance. But the emphasis on the nature rather than on the man himself seeing this. Because nature will make you, in a way, react to this. So I at once, at a glance, tossing their heads, emphasizing what? The personification here. Tossing their heads in a sprightly dance again. And that's how beautiful and pure nature is. The waves, so because of this scene, the waves were dancing. The waves beside them danced, also past simple, but they, referring to the daffodils, Outdid also past simple, the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought. You remember the feelings, the senses, the emotions, the heart, just you're looking at the amazing, magical, magisterial scene. He didn't think. If it is an ordinary poet, like an Augustan poet, they would think more than gazing, like, what an interesting poem, rose or daffodil or flower. Maybe this looks like something. He doesn't care about what it looks like. He cares much about the inspiration, the imagination, the feelings, the beauty. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. I didn't care about what it brought to me. All I cared about was the scene and gazing and absorbing the beauty of nature. Look also at the past simple and past simple. Now, if you go to the rhyme scheme was A, B, C, C. Second syllable, second stanza the same. And here we have they, be, gay, company. There is glee. Glee is like this. And company at the end, it's going to be like this. So it's half of this sound. So this is imperfect rhyme. Thank you. Thought and brought. CC. Okay. Now I want to ask a question. Remember last time when we said the word symmetry was not symmetrical?
Yes.
There was an extra syllable?
Yes.
Because the poet is indicating that there is something wrong with this symmetry. It looks symmetrical and perfect, but in reality, it has trouble, it has problems. The second stanza had also a perfect rhyme, and the last stanza had a perfect rhyme. So this is the only stanza that has imperfect rhyme. There could be a reason. But more interesting to me is the fact that the poet shifts from I wandered lonely, so I, and then he moves to say a poet could not but be gay, to generally he or she. Why did he shift from I to he or to she? The word gay means happy. So it's not about he's like ashamed that people will say he's gay. Gay is happy. In the past it meant happy. So a poet could not but there's emphasis here. In Arabic we call this hasr or qasr, right? For emphasis. So I couldn't but be happy means I am happy. Very happy actually. There's no way I can't be happy. So there is negative here for emphasis. There's an imperfect rhyme here in this area. And there is a shift from the first person narrator to the third person narrator.
To show that this perfect scene could make any person with emotions, and especially boys, because
They have more sensitivity.
yes, make him
Thank you. Interesting. Yes?
The last scheme in company is E or A?
Come. A, B. They and gay is different. This is the sound. You will learn how to do the phonemic transcription hopefully next year. Yes? So we have a suggestion here because this is all poets. All poets, because poets especially have the sensibility, the emotions, the extra emotions to react to this beautiful scene in nature. So all people, especially poets, will be happy. That is true, but I think there is more to this. Let me go back to this after I finish the last stanza, okay? So we'll go back to a poet could not but be gay, because he could have easily said, I was gay, I was happy. The last stanza, this is how it ends. Notice there is a change in what? The first thing. He shifts to the present. And also we have something back. We have the I back. Why is, again, the poem is part past simple and part present simple? So what's going on now?
He's drawing our attention
How?
by shifting from past to present.
So how did the story happen? Where is the poet now? Very now.
In the present.
He's in the present. What is he doing?
Remember.
Oh, recollecting tranquility. And that's an interesting romantic issue here. You need to pay attention to the tenses in order to know what's going on. So what is the poet doing? He says, for oft, when on my couch I lie. When I lie down. Remember, tranquility, peace of mind. Carefree. Nothing to bother him, nothing to trouble him. What happens? Whether he is in vacant or in pensive mood. They, referring to the daffodils, they flash, not something he sees first experience, they flash upon the inward eye, in his imagination, inside him. His mind's eye, his heart's eye, I would say. They flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. Solitude from solo,
From being alone.
being alone. Not emotionally, just no one around you. Bliss, this is a bliss of solitude. This is, as a result, this is a good advantage of being alone in nature, individuality. What happens then? How does the poet, the eye, react? His heart with pleasure fills. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. When we speak normally, naturally, the determiners, the articles, the prepositions, the auxiliaries are not generally stressed. When I say, I went with him, I went with her, she came with me. You don't say she came with me. But here, when you count the stressed and unstressed syllables, something you'll study later on, this with is emphasized, is stressed. It becomes and dances with the daffodils, because the theme is withness with nature, togetherness with nature, unity, melting down, becoming nature, and nature overwhelmingly claiming you, controlling you. So this is the reaction of the poet. His heart with pleasure fills. It overflows with pleasure. And it's not clear here whether he says, like he himself dances with the daffodils or his heart, both. But here it's probably more his heart doing this, and dances with the daffodils. So this is a reaction. What is the difference between this reaction and this reaction? This is a romantic poet, in my opinion. You just don't react, you just fill your heart with pleasure, with beauty and innocence of nature. And as a result, you become a totally different person. You remember, you recollect, not once, not an instant reaction. You just don't look at the daffodils and then you react in this particular way. A romantic poet generally encounters something, sees something. They don't react instantly because this is going to be artificial. If you see a beautiful scene, nature, element, something, and you write poetry instantly, according to the romantics generally, this is not good poetry. So you just absorb everything. You store this. Store, you bear it. He used the word bear, actually. There was bear in this, or that was in another poem. So he keeps it somewhere. When he is in solitude, alone, in vacant or in pensive mood, when he's lying on his couch, all alone, he recollects, he remembers, he recalls this experience and then starts to live it again. And this is more powerful for the romantics than reacting to a scene you just see. So what's going on here? In my opinion, this is a direct criticism from William Wordsworth to classical Augustan poets. He's saying any ordinary poet would just only feel happy, but not William Wordsworth, the romantic poet. So a poet, this is the shift, this is the negative here, and this is the imperfect rhyme. This is an imperfect reaction on nature. If you just react to nature and by being happy, that's not what it takes more to be a romantic poet, to be like us, the romantics. And that's why in the end, the poem ends with, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. There is an interesting fact here. William Wordsworth, when he saw the daffodils, he saw them for real. He had his sister Dorothy with him. And in her diaries, diaries, there is an entry where she tells us something about, I was walking with Willie, or Bill, I don't know what she called him, but with William Wordsworth, and we saw this beautiful, magical, it was magisterial, the daffodils, everything. She describes this in prose, very beautiful. But here, where is she in the poem? Is she in the poem? He kicks her out. Because two is a company. Two is a company, and this is more about a personal, self-expressive experience about individuality. Some people would hate him for doing this. He's silencing her. Hey, Dorothy, get out of this, which is an anti-feminist thing. Maybe you can't take it this way, but generally, because this is what the Romantics say again.
Saying his own experience.
Own experience, and the sister can say her own experience in a way or another. So, a final point, we don't have time to go for Lucy Gray, another beautiful poem, but next class we can do Lucy Gray and we go back to Blake's London. We'll have time to do that. One final thing I want to say about the Romantics is the fact that there's something called, not baby actually, childlike experience. Childlike experience. What is this? The Romantics say the most beautiful, important, significant thing about city, about the Romantics themselves, is they have this romantic childlike reaction to life. They believe, because of corruption and pollution in the city and the factories and the industrial revolution, people go out early in the morning, they keep working until late hours, and they don't have time to appreciate life themselves or nature or the environment, right? They're always busy. They believe that the city has a veil. You know what veil is? Veil. Veil, like hijab. A veil of familiarity. You know familiarity? What is it? What is familiarity in Arabic? In Arabic. Ulfa, thank you. Yeah. So the city life adds a veil of familiarity. Like here, you, for example, us. We're always rushing and busy and competing and running. We have classes, we have exams, we have quizzes, we have to read, right? We have to do assignments, we have to take a taxi. We care about, our parents and the salaries and the work and what should I do when I finish this. There is a lot of care here, a lot of trouble, a lot of problems. That we don't sometimes stop to appreciate the moon or appreciate the flowers or the roses or even the cats here at campus, right? Maybe you play with the cats once in a while. But how many times did you stop to appreciate a rose or a flower? And even these roses and flowers, they are artificial. They are man-made in a way that man controls them and keeps trimming them. If your friend tells you, hey, look at the moon. There's a super moon. It's beautiful. Maybe you don't even see the moon through your window. And maybe you don't have the time because you are on social media spending time and chatting. Maybe because you only have 4 hours of electricity here in Gaza that you just want to do your stuff that requires electricity, that you don't care about nature. So the Romantics say life, especially in the city, has added some sort of a veil of familiarity. يعني حجاب من الألفة, where we don't see things as they should be seen, beautiful and majestic. So they invite us to have this childlike experience. Children, they always react to the same thing. They see the same thing for 100 times and they're like, wow, this is a childlike reaction. When kids start learning words, for example, and they see the lights, they keep referring to it like 100 times every day. Daw, right? Daw, right? When they go out, when you are in a taxi or something, they see a donkey and they were like, Hmar, Hmar, right? Like, I know. But this is how children generally react to things they see again and again. But for us, adults, experience deprives us of this beautiful not childish, childlike reaction, where every time you see something, you just... So he shifts from the past to the present because he's recollecting, And because he's telling us, I relive this beautiful moment
As a child.
every time I want to relive this. So, beautiful encounter, kind of flashbacking on something. Please, put this in mind. When I teach literature, I always invite my students to reconsider their lives. This is not about exams. Yeah, I know you want to get high marks, you should, and you study, but also think of how literature can change you, can change your lives, can make you better human beings, can make you think, can make you grow, exactly like movies. And poetry here invites us to be different, to care about others, to like, to love. And this is part of the question you need to answer. How literature influences. Literature is a criticism of life and a tool of empowerment. It makes us better people, more powerful people. Especially for people like us here, oppressed and occupied by the Israeli occupation, especially if we are women and we need to raise our voices and reach out to people and break the barriers, break the glass ceiling, break the unfavorable rules around us here or there. So this is one poem by William Wordsworth that has almost all the features of Romanticism. Nature, tick. Individuality, tick. Imagination, tick. Man and nature, simplicity, tick. I think you'll find 2-3 words, but imagine yourself a native speaker in grade 7 in England or America. You will get most of the words, if not all of them. Subject matter, common life, flowered from nature, also tick. What else? Recalling memory, tick. How you break the rules in order to, sometimes to convey a message with the imperfect rhyme, also tick. I'll stop here, and if you have any question, you can definitely ask. Next class, we'll continue doing Lucy Gray by William Wordsworth, and we will have time to do London by William Blake. Thank you very much, and hopefully this will change something in you. يعطيكم العافية.